Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got one of my favorite people in the basketball industry, Matt Moore, joining the podcast to talk some more trade deadline stuff. He is out in Denver. He knows that front office reasonably well, I would say. And Denver is connected with a lot of different players now. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about Boston. We're going to talk about Cleveland. Some of the other inflection points that I think are going to make a difference during this trade deadline. But before we do that, Matt, how is it going?
It's going well. It's going well. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of talk. We'll see if there's actually anything substantial that happens from it. But right now, people are chit-chatting away is what's going on in the NBA right now.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of talk and no action. So in that vein, it's worth mentioning that Matt now works for the Action Network. Do you want to give a quick little plug at the top about what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. You can find us at actionnetwork.com. Got up to the second betting line info, DFS stuff. The DFS stuff we have is really cool. If you do fantasy at all, you need to check out the site. We've got some amazing stuff every single day, in-depth analysis. I've got a piece up on odds, actually, on trade deadline, whether guys are going to get moved or not, and kind of what I'm hearing on those kind of fronts. So you should check that out. You can sign up for our newsletter and sign up to subscribe at actionnetwork.com.
So I would suggest everyone do that. I'm going to do it right after we get off this podcast because holy shit, did that dude Stuckey, who also works with you at Action Network, just murder Super Bowl props last night.
Yeah, he's good. Stuckey is exceptionally good at that, at pretty much everything related with gambling.
So yeah, I mean, between you, between him, everything else that's going on over there, I'm going to go subscribe after this podcast ends. But let's talk about some of the trade deadline stuff that Matt wrote about today, some of the other stuff that we're kind of, hearing, anything else that we find interesting. And the place I want to start is Marcus Smart, because he represents, along with a lot of other players of his ilk, an interesting inflection point this deadline. And by his ilk, I mean players who are restricted free agents this offseason, where there is little to no money available outside of mid-level exceptions. And those players are all expecting to really get paid and really have some sort of leverage to go out and get a big deal. So, I mean, in general, what is your feeling on a lot of these restricted free agents? Marcus Smart fits this bill. Rodney Hood fits this bill. Aaron Gordon kind of fits this bill, even though I can't really understand why the hell the Magic are considering trading Aaron Gordon right now, given the fact that he might be their only decent basketball player that can really help a winner for them in the future. A couple of other guys, Julius Randle is a restricted free agent. Jabari Parker is going to be a restricted free agent. Everyone in the 2014 class outside of Dario Saric is a restricted free agent. So what is kind of your feeling on the market for those guys?
I think for free agency wise, we're going to see another truncation. It just become very evident. Like the line was kind of set last year that if you're not a star player, if you're not Otto Porter, if you're not a guy that's essential to a team, and Porter was kind of different because the Wizards had to kind of pay out because they don't have the cap flexibility to make alternative moves. So if you're not in that kind of a situation, you're going to get stuck. You're just going to, Andre Robertson is underpaid right now. He just is. He's underpaid because those guys are simply not going to get what they want in the market. When we're talking about trading for them, I think those guys are kind of an inefficiency. So they're a known inefficiency opportunity. And in that way, I think actually that they're being pretty highly valued. I think guys like the market demands, from what I understand, for guys like Rodney Hood are pretty high. The guys like Smart, you mentioned, right off the top, and Boston, it's hard. Smart's hard to kind of evaluate because look, there's restricted free agents and what their value is, and then there's dealing with Boston. And that's entirely two different things. And every front office person I talk to says the same thing, which is yeah, no, we called, but you have to deal with Boston. So we'll see if the price comes down, but probably won't. And that's just kind of how it goes. The stuff that has been reported about first round pick is accurate. I know that, but I also know that some of this, the connections between Denver and Boston. This is what's funny about the trade deadline is most of what you're going to hear is old. There was radio silence about those conversations for about 2 weeks. So they were talking 2-3 weeks ago. And then there was radio silence. And then things picked up yesterday in a very brief way. But not to the point where, like in Denver, there are levels of escalation. Most places there are. It's like it starts in a conversation and then it escalates to a team-wide meeting, and then there's an evaluation period of other departments, and then it goes to ownership. Like that's the escalation you have to get to, and it has to clear all those things. And like Smart didn't go anywhere. Like that conversation didn't go anywhere with Denver. So it wasn't nearly kind of like the fact. This is what's funny is like they've had conversations, and what that is like. Boston's leaking that Marcus Smart is they're asking for a first round pick because Boston uses the public to negotiate. And that's not wrong. I think that there's a lot of teams that do that. Like there's a lot of franchises that use the media to negotiate on the trade market. There are some teams that don't do it at all. Like Dallas and San Antonio don't do that. OKC does not do that, at least not right now. But there are a lot of franchises that do use that. So it's just a matter of it's part of how the game is played. But I think Smart, I will say this, from what I understand, Marcus Smart's not going to be a Boston Celtic on Friday. And that's for a number of reasons. But because of that combination of factors, I would say that while I think that it's very difficult for any of these moves to happen, Marcus Smart is one I look at and go, I think it's more likely than not that he winds up somewhere else on Friday.
So you mentioned Denver. Obviously, that was a longer conversation 2 weeks ago, I guess. But the question that I have for you is, how do you think that fit is in Denver? I actually think it's a really, really strong fit. And I think it's why why Boston felt it intelligent to negotiate through the media as if to say, Denver is looking at him, because you look at the way that Marcus Smart fits that roster. I think he's kind of exactly what they should be looking for from a filling out their backcourt long-term perspective, because the things that they lack right now is kind of what Marcus Smart brings, right? Like they can feel pretty good about Jamal Murray, Gary Harris bringing shooting and bringing offensive creative ability long-term. Gary Harris I think he gives a shit defensively, and he actually tries defensively, but he's small. I mean, he's better off defending ones and twos than he is true wings. And that's what Marcus Smart can bring. He can bring the ability off the bench to match up with different lineups in the playoffs. And that's a really, really useful tool for Denver, I think. You throw in the fact that he can probably play with any real backcourt combination. You can throw him out with Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, and him. You can throw him out with Jamal Murray, Will Barton, and him. You can throw him out with Harris and Barton. And I think that combination works as well. It's a really, really smart plant by Boston, and it's almost certainly coming from Boston, to try and drum up his trade value, I think.
Yeah, I think his fit with Denver is interesting in that if you put him and Jamal Murray in a backcourt together, you have a really incredible balance of size, shooting ability, athleticism, playmaking. Smart's a really, really gifted playmaker. Like his passing is very underrated, I think, at this point, league wide. What's interesting, you mentioned it, like they're bad defensively because of their guys are young, their bigs are not great, and their wings are suspect as well. So like, I actually think that Jamal Murray has the capability to be, as he gets bigger and better and stronger and smarter, I think Jamal Murray is going to be a plus defender. I don't think he's going to be an A+, but I think he'll be a plus defender. I think
I was surprised with how good he was last year. I thought he was going to be legitimately the worst defender in the NBA. In his
Me too. I thought, I was like, well, he's just going to get lost off ball and he's not going to be able to, and like, he has a nose for the ball. Part of it is that I think people underestimated, and I've got a feature coming out on Murray here in the next week or so. I did. His mindset is above everybody else his age. Like, the kid is smarter, more dedicated, and more intense about wanting to be great. And he's also he's one of those competitive dudes that he's not going to just accept not playing defense. It's just not going to happen that way for him. He has the kind of mindset where he doesn't want a weakness. So he's going to attack. You're right that Gary Harris is small, but that's really his only limitation. He's been really good defensively this year. So like, if you add Smart, what's exciting is Smart's ability to switch and to play positions 1 through 5 effectively means that you can get away with lineups that are Murray, Harris, Smart. You have 3 legitimate playmakers on the floor. You have 2 legitimate shooters, and you have a guy that you can constantly switch with. I think that's really interesting and optimal for them.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but realistically, if you have those 3 playmakers on the floor, you're going to have 5 playmakers on the floor if you play them with Paul Millsap and Nikola Jokic.
Right. Now, at the same time, the kind of the question is what's the market, right? And what Denver would do is Denver would make it very well known, hey, we're re-signing him no matter what. They'd have to get that out there because they're going to be in a money crunch next year no matter what. I think it's likely if they did that deal, they'd be willing to take that on because it's the biggest thing for them is honestly it's getting off of Moutier. It's like that's like their big key here is if they get off of Moutier, they save that money. They don't have to worry about dealing with him and losing him for nothing, even though he's not really worth anything at this point. And they add Smart, they'll have to pay him. But if they are able to get out there and get ahead of it, like if they get Marcus Smart back at like 3 years, 24, if they get him back for $8 million, if they get him back for 3 years, 36, like they've probably done pretty well.
That's a win, I think, for them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a win for them. So, and like nobody's going to give Marcus Smart 15. Like nobody is going to be like, oh yeah, we're putting everything on Smart. Part of it is there are questions about like the stuff with the lacerated hand is an outlier, but there's concerns that it points to an overall trend with him in terms of his maturity level. I'm not as worried about that. Like I think Marcus Smart's a competitor. I think Marcus Smart over a long term can be fine and can be really good. I think he's a really good player. I think he's valuable for what they do. But these are all things that I think you have to factor in. So the deal makes a lot of sense, but the trick, of course, is getting Boston to do it for not like, well, how about instead of Smart, we give you Yabu, and instead of you giving us Moutier, you give us Jokic. Like that's, I mean, like I just when Danny Ainge calls, I would just be like, I can't deal with this. I just can't.
The interesting kind of plan, I'm trying to think of like other Marcus Smart landing spots. I mean, Minnesota, if they just want to like say, okay, we're never going to shoot threes again under Tibbs, like that kind of makes sense to me. Oklahoma City, if they want to replace Andre Robertson for this season particularly, and then just kind of roll with what they can roll with in the future, that's relatively interesting to me if they think they have to be good this year to re-sign Paul George, which probably accurate. The other kind of weird landing spot for me is I kind of like the idea of a team like the Clippers who aren't necessarily rebuilding, but are trying to rebuild on the fly almost, taking a chance on getting Marcus Smart on a relatively cheap deal in the offseason, like 336 or something like that, having him for the future and having a real rotation player going forward that can actually help you. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to look at it. That's all I can really say is like I think you're spot on there. Yeah. Let's go on ahead. I want to talk about Denver a little bit more. Denver is in an interesting spot because I think that they could realistically find a way to attach their first round pick, much in the way that New Orleans did with the Ashik deal. I think that Denver could be in a great spot to find a way to match their first round pick with Darrell Arthur to get off of some money and still get a valuable piece in return. The deal that I came up with earlier was Darrell Arthur, Malik Beasley, and a first round pick for Spencer Dinwiddie and Jahlil Okafor. I think that if Brooklyn wants to deal Spencer Dinwiddie, they first have to find out if he's going to test the market next summer. If he's going to test the market next summer, then I would seriously deal him right now. There's just no circumstance where I'm letting him get away for cheap whenever you can realistically try and cash in on one of the best trade chips in the entire NBA right now, because you can get a 30 or I guess a 29 team bidding war going. What do you think of the idea of Spencer Dinwiddie in Denver?
Denver's perfect for him. That's actually like an ideal situation. Look, Spencer's been their MVP. Like he's been their best player overall. He's just been their best guy.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the fact that Jeremy Lin has an ETO for next season, are you gonna let he'll probably opt in given the injury, right? So he opts in. Yeah. But then, like, are you going to let him go? Because he's extremely popular and they've played well with him. Like, you're latched to D'Angelo Russell. That's pretty clear. Like, even as well as Spencer has played, you're latched to him. But don't you kind of want Dinwiddie around for insurance? That's where I keep getting to is a lot of it is not like whether you should trade a guy, it's whether you should trade a guy now. So Denver has to get salary relief because after they get Jokic's big deal this summer, they're going to be looking at a luxury tax, and that ownership group is going to go no. And even if they'll probably be okay with going up to the tax, but not over it, or at least not over it to any significant degree. And if that's the case, then that's a concern that they have to deal with. But their position has been pretty firmly like, we don't have to deal with it until next April. That's when the tax bill comes due. We have a year and a week to get a deal done for us to get out of the tax situation. And so, like, they're not pressed to be able to address that. Now, Dinwiddie's an opportunity, like you said, to be able to bring in a guy that fits perfectly. Like, if you brought in Dinwiddie right now, it's tough because I struggle with this because I don't want to kill Emmanuel Mudiay too much. Just because he's so young. It was a tough situation. He failed so hard and it shook his confidence. He's been like, he hasn't talked to the media all year. Like, he literally will not speak to the media. Mm-hmm. Because he's so like downtrodden and upset with what's happened to his career arc. Even though it's like the media gave him a lot of opportunities. I'm like, well, he's young and he'll get it. And it's just like, it didn't happen. But the reality is when you look at the numbers and when you watch them night in, night out, if Denver just did not play Emmanuel Mudiay, if they replaced him with any point guard in the league, literally any below average point guard in the league, Denver probably has 3 to 4 more wins right now. And I say that as somebody that says that star players do not add 3 to 4 win. Like the numbers have always shown, the models indicate that almost no player adds more than 3 wins to your total. So that's how important Emmanuel Mudiay not playing for them is. If they brought in Dinwiddie, they probably they make the playoffs. Like, that's the reality. I just don't know that. I just don't know that it's enough. I just don't. If I'm Brooklyn, as well as Dinwiddie has played, because it's also like, it's not just how what his value is objectively. It's like, what's his value to us? And I think Dinwiddie's value to Brooklyn is actually really high, given Lynn's injury history and Russell's inconsistency. Like, I think that Dinwiddie has to be really valuable for them, and especially like if they had the pick right, if they had the pick this year, and it was well, we're gonna get Trae Young anyway, or we're gonna get Doncic or whatever, then that's one thing. But they don't. So I think in that regard, I think that Dinwiddie's probably too valuable for what Denver can put together. Because what the package you described is definitely something I think that they would be amenable and interested in. But at the same time, that's as much as Denver can realistically offer, because Denver can't afford to give up anything of substance because their roster is like, it's not delicate, but it's definitely like it's a Lego house. And if you take away a big chunk, it can fall.
So I guess that what I would say to that, though, is that in Dinwiddie's case and in Brooklyn's case, you have a guy now who in a year and a half, he is an unrestricted free agent. You don't know if he's going to be on your next winning team. That's why I think you really have to have a serious conversation with him right now. Hey, Spencer, how hard are you going to test the market next summer? Like, are you serious right now about trying to go out there and get the absolute most money? We're happy to give you a lot of money, but are you going to actually take a chance and try and explore other avenues beyond the Brooklyn Nets? We gave you your biggest chance. You're succeeding under our roof. We don't think you want to leave Kenny Atkinson, but is there a chance you do? And if he answers that question, yes, and you can go out and get a package involving Malik Beasley, who has 7 years of team control left, and you can get a first-round pick that has 8 years of team control left, 2 pieces who can legitimately be on your next winning team, it's hard for me to pass that up. I think Malik Beasley can be a legit top 6 player in a rotation at some point. He's a really good scorer. He has length defensively. He has a lot of room to grow still, but I think he can be that kind of player. The first round pick can be the first round pick. Who the hell knows what it'll be, but that's actually a valuable package to me for a rebuilding team that does not have a first round pick this year, as you mentioned. To me, the lack of first round pick actually makes me want to deal Dinwiddie a little bit more right now.
Yeah, and getting into the draft, I mean, that's one of the ideas, right? It's like, hey, if we can get into this draft, is it worth it? And you can answer that question a little bit better than I can in terms of how good the draft is in terms of the depth. But I think for them also, one thing I've been thinking a lot about this lately is that front offices don't deal from positions of weakness or to cover up for issues as much as we think that they do or they should. They deal from positions of advantage and opportunity. So they don't have a first round pick this year. They should go get one. Okay, but think about it this way. Next year, they'll have their first round pick.
True.
And if they have their first round pick next year, and then they go through the whole process, and then they get to the end of the trade deadline next year, and they're in roughly the same spot, which seems likely, well, then they can deal Dinwiddie. And even if they can't get a first-round pick back, they can probably package it with something else to get to that level. You can then have another first-round pick, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we've got multiple first-round picks after this long drought of not having one. So the question is whether it's more valuable to do it now or whether it's to do it at this year's draft or whether it's to do it next year. And all those factors, I think, are what's interesting and things that are part of the calculus for what Brooklyn have to figure out.
Right. And I think what it comes down to for me is I think that they can get multiple strong assets for Spencer Dinwiddie right now. I think that if they trade him next deadline, you might be looking at a late first round pick, like 25 to 30, but ultimately I don't know if you're getting that. I think a lot would depend on how steady he keeps his performance going, right? If he continues to be what he's been so far, 18 PER, 3 game winners, bringing incredible defensive versatility to the Brooklyn Nets lineup. Yeah, he's obviously going to get something like a first round pick. But if you're not 100% sure he's going to keep that up, and given the fact that this sample this season is really all we have of him being at this level, it's a tricky spot for me. And if I'm them, I'm selling high, I think, just given the spot and given the fact that he's a restricted free agent next summer.
Yeah, I can understand that. And, I'm still very high on Malik. He's like, he's become a divisive figure in Denver, both with front office and media folks about what his ceiling is and what he's going to be long term. I still really like him. I think he's going to be excellent. I think Emmanuel Mudiay. This is a discussion that one of the Denver media members asked me today was, what does Emmanuel Mudiay look like under Brad Stevens? And that's like a really scary idea. Is like, if you just put Emmanuel Mudiay under Brad Stevens, what does he look like with his athleticism and package? Because all the things with Mudiay have always been fixable. He just never has fixed them. So I think these are all things that make it like a really attractive package. Like you said, it's just that Dinwiddie's value is just so high right now. Like, and the other thing is you have to understand, like, this, combo guard that is okay with coming off of the bench, which Dinwiddie would be, is just so valuable right now. Like, there's so many teams that just need that guy. Like, that's just exactly what so many teams need. Like the Cavs need that guy. Hell, the Cavs need a starter. Like, the Wizards, like, down the list, if you add Dinwiddie to all of these different teams, they're all going to get better because of the specific role that he's at and the lack of options there. That's why Denver hasn't gotten another veteran point guard. There are no good options that fit their cap restraints. And so that's one of the things I think is will make it interesting. I won't be surprised at all if Dinwiddie gets moved. Just because I think Brooklyn, I think, understands, like, look, this is great, but we have to think big picture. And that's just cool. And so it won't surprise me at all if he's moved. It's just a matter of whether or not Denver has what it's going to take to get him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Let's talk about Cleveland. Let's just move them up because you segued into it so well. I think you and I have been lower on Cleveland throughout the course of this entire year than anyone else. Like, to be frank, I think I would pick Boston to come out of the Eastern Conference right now. I probably would not pick Toronto over Cleveland to come out of the East, but I would pick Boston, I think. Before we have the trade deadline discussion, with where Cleveland's roster stands right now, who would you pick to come out of the East?
The field. Like, that's...
Well...
No,
I understand that.
That's my thing. If you ask me to take one team over Cleveland, I can't do it.
Okay, that's fair.
But if you ask me, do you like everybody else or Cleveland? I say I like everybody else.
Yeah.
And
I feel the same way about Boston.
Like, every 3 years, like every year of the last 3 years, it's been, well, I like I'll take Cleveland over the field. Like Cleveland, I think is 70-30. And this year I'm like, no, I think Cleveland's got like a 30% chance to come out of the East. But that's it. I think Cleveland has a 30% chance to come out of the East. That's how bad their defense is. When you factor in like plausible scenarios, like, look, if they get Philadelphia in a first round series, could Philadelphia snake up and bite them? Yes. Will they? Probably. I won't pick against them. They have LeBron, right? Philadelphia's never been in the playoffs. Philadelphia's roster is extremely thin. Yada, 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 yada. But if you ask me, Philadelphia could catch them in the first. Toronto could catch them in the second. Boston can catch them in the ECF. I think one of those teams get them. And you can sub out Philly for anyone, and you can sub in Washington for a number of these teams. Like, there are a bunch
Milwaukee.
And Milwaukee. Like, there's just a bunch of teams that I would be like, I'm really worried about this matchup. I don't feel comfortable here. I don't understand, and this continues to be a thing because I asked it on Saturday during the Rockets debacle about who's still on. The Cavs do this every year. They're going to be fine. And like a lot of people responded, I'm still there. Now, a lot of them responded like, I'm still there, but I'm building a raft. And it's pretty funny. Like David Aldridge is still on that island, and I get it. But it's just that they are so fundamentally different from years past. I keep hammering this point. Like, these are not the same dudes. They're just not. Like in 2015, Mozzie and Delly were a big part of their success because Love got hurt and Kyrie got hurt. And Kyrie was hurt in the ECF. People forget that part. He was hurt in the ECF, and Delly played his ass off versus Atlanta. Now, I'm not saying they'd be better with those guys, but I'm saying that the roster was different in 2015. In 2016, you had the best version of J.R. Smith we've ever seen.
Yep.
You had Richard Jefferson. You had all of these guys up and down the line who could actually significantly help.
You had good Tristan Thompson defensively, too.
He had good Tristan Thompson before whatever the hell happened to him. And now, it's like, look, Jeff Green has played well, but Jeff Green plays a significant role in this team. Derrick Rose plays a significant role in this team. One-legged Isaiah Thomas plays a significant role in this team. And on top of it all, there's no way of getting around it. LeBron has been bad defensively. LeBron bears responsibility for his play, and his play defensively has not lived up. Like, their offense has suffered recently, and it's absolutely true. And like the Cavs analysts are very big on this, and they're right. They keep saying like, look, everyone's talking about the defense, but they could still win games with their offense. And that's true, but I don't think that they can beat the kind of teams that they're going to face in the playoffs. Because a lot of it's like, Toronto's better now. And I'm still skeptical of Toronto because I've seen them wet themselves 4 years in a row. Until Toronto does not wet themselves in the playoff run, I can't have faith in them. But if Toronto comes out in game one, if they're in a 2-7 matchup versus Milwaukee or Indiana, and they wax that first team by like 30 points, I'm going to get on board. If they come out in game one and just absolutely, if they win their first two games with a point differential of like 15, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm ready to go because, DeRozan's playing differently. The bench is incredible. They have a different, my big thing, and this is kind of where I've figured out that I've like discovered my identity as an analyst. I care about two things in the regular season: win profiles and what's your formula. Like, win profiles are how you get to the playoffs. Your formula is how you're going to win in them. And I like Toronto's formula. And I like Boston's formula, even though I have some concerns. And I like Milwaukee's, even though they're obviously really shaky and all over the place. There's a lot of these teams. I even like Washington. I think Washington's playoff formula is excellent. You asked me about Cleveland's, and I'm like, their only objective, like their only shot is we're going to hit more threes than you, and we're just going to outscore you. And over time, they've gotten worse and worse and worse. They have no floor balance. So to me, you asked me like who's coming out. The long way of saying, you asked me who's coming out of the East. I don't think it's Cleveland. I really seriously don't. It wouldn't stun me if it was, but I don't think it's them. But at the same time, because of all these things that I've mentioned, like you mentioned Boston, that offense is a problem. Like,
yeah,
that offense,
I agree.
That offense is a problem.
Yeah, it's inconsistent. They struggle to find the right guys on the floor consistently in the right spots. Like their best play is running an Al Horford, Kyrie Irving dribble handoff where, Al certainly presents a lot of different options. And if Jaylen Brown is knocking down corner threes, he presents a lot of different options. Jason Tatum has fallen off a little bit from the torrid shooting start, but I think he's probably still going to knock down shots from the wing. The problem is that they just don't really have anything else than Kyrie creating off the bounce. Like, I'm not going to count on Jason and Jalen at 20 years old to be able to create off the bounce. I'm not going to count on Al Horford to be able to create off the bounce. Maybe Terry Rozier is now God. I mean, that's entirely possible. We cannot rule that out now, but I still want them to have one more creator. I think they need one more guy who they can consistently count on to make plays for them.
Yeah, and his name, and that guy's name is Gordon Hayward.
Right, exactly. That's who they were expecting to have. He was supposed to be their guy that would be able to take on the brunt of the offense. He's not going to be able to do that.
Now, I don't think, I'll say this, I don't think if Gordon Hayward was healthy that they're where they are now.
It's a good question.
This is my, the NBA is great evidence of chaos theory. Like, you change one element of a team's dynamic and everything shifts. And they were so unbelievable in November. And it was clear that it was like a young team with a bunch of guys whose scouting reports hadn't really gotten out to the rest of the league yet. Like, no one knew who Tatum was. And Jalen was still kind of this like amorphous blob, right? That didn't actually have like a game. And now, like, he has a game. And then, they were in close games and Kyrie won a lot of them.
And they play their ass off defensively. Right. They started to give more effort because they felt they had to give more effort, probably because Gordon was out.
Right. Gordon's presence changes the entire dynamic. It's not that he's a bad player. He makes them better overall. I'd feel way better about their playoff chances with Gordon Hayward. Yeah. But I don't think that they're the number one seed. And like, I think they're probably second just because Cavs have been so bad. But that's what's crazy is like, I don't think if Gordon Hayward gets hurt, I think if Gordon Hayward gets hurt, we're talking about, is this Toronto's year? But because of how they've reacted to, and that's a credit to Brad. Like, and it's very Brad, right? Like, it's very Brad to be like, oh, we need like this super crazy like thing to go right for us, and for him to just manifest it out of the air with like a bunch of guys who are underdogs and like pulling them all together. So,
by the way, we're probably not going to be able to talk about Toronto too much. I find it incredible that Toronto decides to bring everyone back in spite of so many people saying that they should just kind of kill this. They should end this roster. They should move on from everything and start over a little bit. They bring everyone back and now they're in pretty decent spot, at least, to make the NBA finals. I mean, they're in a better spot than they were last year, certainly.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Honestly, I think a lot of it is, I think Masai Ujiri he's in my top 5 for executives in the league. He might be number 1, quite honestly. Just like his overall approach to everything, he's up there for me for the best executive in the league. So I say this not with any sort of like bias against Masai whatsoever. I covered him in Denver. He's always been very gracious to me. But Masai keeps benefiting from like random stuff working out, like random stuff. Just like, where did that come from? He takes over and Carmelo Anthony asks for a trade, and 9 times out of 10, that's doom. Like, that's just absolute doom. You're trading your best player, and instead he gets back the core functions of a team that allows him to create a 57-win team in 2013 that got hit by an even bigger collusion of events in the Warriors, but still, like, that's how good he was able to make that team. He goes to Toronto. He's going to blow it up. He's going to trade everybody. And instead, he trades Rudy Gay. The team gets red hot. And then James Dolan, because he's so worried about it, like, turns down an offer for Kyle Lowry. And then here we are. And now here again.
And takes the Andrea Bargnani deal.
Right. And then now here again, he keeps this core together, even though they've proven time and time again that under no circumstances is this team able to function in a playoff environment. Like, even though they made the Eastern Conference Finals once and won that first round series last year, like, they look bad in every playoff series that they're in. But he keeps it together. And what happens? Like, Jonas Valanciunas is shooting 40% from 3. DeMar DeRozan has taken 4 times as many 3-pointers off of the pick and roll than he has last year. And he's made a fair amount of them. Like, all of these things match. And like this bench of young dudes that are all like, there's no studs on that bench that you're like, oh, one day they're going to, it's not like with Portland with CJ McCollum where it's like, oh, one day CJ is going to be really good. Like you look at this team and you're like, oh, Fred VanVleet, wait, what? And then it's like, no, they're really good with Fred VanVleet on the floor. Like all of these things have come together. It's like, really, the basketball gods are like, we appreciate your approach to things so much, Masai. We're going to not let you do all of the things that you actually want to do. We're going to make you have a good team.
No, I love it though. I think he's done a really great job. And I think that he has withstood a lot in the Toronto marketplace to try and blow that team up. All of the factors were going against blowing this team up. And I love the fact that he didn't. I said at the time, I think that if you told me it was worth blowing this team up and then kicking the can down the road until, God knows when, or having 3 good years of a good team and maybe you make the NBA finals 1 year, I think everyone should take that. Like, I love this idea at the time in the summer, especially given the fact that they got Kyle Lowry and Serge on a 3-year deal each, and they have DeMar DeRozan for 3 more guaranteed years. They lined up everything perfectly that they can hit the eject button in a relatively easy way too. And I think that's important, but let's talk about the Cavs, who are about to, I think, have a problem hitting the eject button and going into a real rebuild. LeBron, I mean, I agree with you on the defense. He has been an incredibly poor defender. I think part of it is the fact that he's still playing 37 minutes a night because Ty Lue won't sit his ass down and get him a break. Probably doesn't want to have a break. I'm sure LeBron has a say in that as well. But at the same level, I don't worry about LeBron defensively in the playoffs. Like, I'm just not worried about that. I am worried about the rest of the guys they have. This has been a flawed roster from the start, both in terms of athleticism, 3-point shooting, and defensive ability. J.R. Smith is 32 years old. He is an inattentive defender. He is not going to be a guy that you can trust in a playoff series right now. Isaiah Thomas is coming off an injury. He has never been a good defensive basketball player. Dwayne Wade is 36. He's not a good defensive basketball player. Jeff Green, not a great defender. Kyle Korver, a smart defender who is limited because he's 36. Tristan Thompson has not been the same. Iman Shumpert is a good on-ball defender who gets lost off the ball. Jose Calderon, Channing Frye, these guys are flawed. I just don't know where people thought that they could get away with that in the playoffs, I guess maybe Jay Crowder was the saving grace, right? And I think that if they get into a series with the Warriors, he could end up being useful for them if he starts to kind of pick it back up. But at the same token, this is just a really flawed roster. And this is something I brought up with Jared Weiss on this podcast in November when they started. What did they start? Like 2-8 or something like that? Like, this is a flawed team and they need to make categorical moves. They don't need to make one move. They need to make 2 to 3 moves to clean out this roster and at least give themselves a chance in the playoffs.
You can't clear out what they needed to clear out and get it back together and fix it in 2 months. Like, this is where I'm at. It's where I've been at. And I don't care how many people tell me I'm insane. I don't care. They should go to LeBron James and say, look, where do you want to go?
Oh, I agree with you, but I don't think they're going to do that.
Here's the thing. That's just a better option. That's the better option. And I don't know how to talk about what the Cavs need to do and not talk about the only real option that they have. Like, that's the problem is, like, if you ask me what can the Cavs do? And I say, well, they need to trade LeBron. Well, they can't do that, or they won't do that. And it's like, that's the only option I can tell you, because I've bandied about ideas like this. If you trade Kevin Love, even with the injury, be okay. If you trade Kevin Love and J.R. Smith and Tristan Thompson, and you take on Marvin Williams, Kemba Walker, or even leave Marvin Williams out, or leave Kemba out, take on Marvin Williams, MKG, Nicholas Batum. Like, you've shaken up things. You have 2 guys that can hit shots and 1 guy who's athletic. You have plus defenders in all 3 of them when they're engaged in a good system. All of these things, like, work in the right direction. But I look at that and I realize, like, I like all those players, and I think that those are all good players, and I think those players can all contribute to a championship team at some point. But I'm still looking at that and I'm like, man, that's Anton Jameson from 2010. Like that's what we're talking about. That's Antoine Jameson from 2010. Is you're making a desperation move to try and keep him, and it puts them in the unfair position of basically having to be the savior. There is no savior coming. It is not happening. And so for me, like, this is the worst part is, like, I would honestly just be like, look, I know it's bad, but part of me, I would just be like, look, man, this is partly on you. And you could have fixed all of this. If you told us you were coming back, we go to Paul George with that, and that's what happens. Paul George is here right now if you say you're coming back. You made that decision, and that's fine. You get to make that decision. But because you made that decision, we're here. And because you made that decision and we're here, we have to do what's best for the future of the franchise. And I would be just be targeting first-round picks and young prospects.
Oh, of course. I agree with you on that. Let me try and we're going to talk about this in a second, but I want to try and realistically fix the Cavs with options that are actually on the table, because I do agree with you that they should do that. I don't know that they're going to do it. My best move for them is to get DeAndre Jordan and Avery Bradley. What do you think of that?
Okay, so one, breaking news on this podcast. The market on DeAndre is really high because they have multiple suitors. And anytime that you have multiple suitors, like, Cleveland's out because they don't have enough. You can throw in the Brooklyn pick, but like, other teams are in a position to be able to offer a mid-round, first-round pick and then multiple young assets. Cleveland doesn't have any of those guys because they chose not to go after any of them. They didn't develop any of their young dudes, which was a mistake. Like, think of it this way. If you just, like, swap the approach of the Cavs with all their ancient dudes that they targeted with, like, the Warriors could be like, hey, if the Warriors were in the Cavs position, they'd be like, hey, we got Patrick McCaw, we've got Jordan Bell, and we got the Nets pick. And, like, okay. And then, like, you add in, like, we'll give you Tristan Thompson too. And now all of a sudden the Clippers would be like, all right, let's go. Let's talk. You know? Versus, like, Cleveland, who's like, hey, do you want the rotting corpse of J.R. Smith? Like,
yeah, like, I didn't understand that rumor that came out today that was Tristan, J.R., and, like, their first. It was like, that, there's no chance that's getting done.
Right. So, like, I think the DeAndre thing is too high. I think DeAndre helps a lot. Like, I think that's a step in the right direction. To be quite honest with you, I'm not willing to go down Avery Bradley territory for a little while. Like, I want to see what he gets paid. I want to see what his defensive rating looks like next year. I want to see what his injury situation is. And I want to give some of the stuff that's gone on off the court a little bit of time. Like, I want to give Avery Bradley a little bit of a quarantine zone before I'm investing in him as the potential, like, we're going to keep LeBron because we got Avery Bradley. I'm not willing to go there. I also think Bradley's an exceptional on-ball defender.
Yeah.
I think he falls into the same trap that he is a less acerbic, less dramatic Patrick Beverley. In that Patrick Beverley is one of the best on-ball defenders I've ever seen. Like, he is just a razorback. And he went to school there, so that's a bad comparison. But, like, he really is just this animal that will absolutely claw and bite you to pieces. Like, you're scrambling to get away, and he's on top of you, tearing your face off. However, the Spurs last year in the playoff series simply said, we're going to have Kawhi have the ball, and we're going to run the ball through LaMarcus in the post, and then Tony's going to run off ball, and then Tony's going to clear two back screens, and Patrick Beverley's going to fall absolutely asleep. And they got shot after shot after shot for Tony Parker before he got injured because Beverley was not able to keep the attention span, and Patty Mills was the same way. Bradley is that same dude. Where, like, when you start, especially, like, I've also found this, a lot of it honestly is the defensive scheme. If you put guys of Bradley's size and kind of mindset where they're the weak side tag man, and you tell them that they have to tag, you are giving up corner threes by the bunches.
Yeah.
And that's what Cleveland does. Cleveland tags, which they shouldn't. They should just stay home. Like, they should just run what Boston runs and just stay home. They should run what Portland runs. Stay home, drop the big, give up as many like off the dribble 3-pointers as allowed. Like, until you get to Steph, don't worry about anything else. Like, that's how you get to where you need to go. because their pick and roll defense is actually pretty good. But like Bradley in that situation, I don't think works. Like I would rather here's a better one. Go get Courtney Lee. Upstanding dude, longer defender.
Yeah.
Reasonable contract. Like I think Courtney Lee is better than Avery Bradley.
Huh. Probably a little bit less creative offensively, lesser of an on-ball defender, but definitely better off-ball.
You need
probably a more trustworthy shooter at this stage.
You need a creator when you have LeBron James playing 38 minutes in a playoff series. And if you would say like, well, you need another creator, like they have creators.
Yeah, they have IT. Like IT's not going anywhere. It seems like
Wade. Like this is what's been underrated. Their bench units were when they were not a tire fire. Their bench units were good, and a large part of that was because Wade. Wade's still a guy that you can give the ball to, and he'll make the right play.
It's funny how that works with Hall of Famers.
I think Wes Matthews, another is a better target. Here's one that I'm interested in: Danny Green.
I cannot see the Spurs trading him.
It's a complicated relationship. It's always been a complicated relationship.
Continue.
Like Pop loves him, right? But Pop loved George Hill, right?
Yeah.
And he gets on Danny, and Danny's also here's some Google magic.
Are you talking about money wise?
No, Danny's 30.
Right. Yeah. Danny Green is a little bit older than what people think he is. Yeah. He is. I think he's too valuable to them if they want to try and make a run in the playoffs. And I cannot see Greg Popovich deciding we're just going to punt the playoffs.
Yeah. I just think that I wonder if there's not a three-way deal to be found where San Antonio could get some younger talent that's got a little bit of like more versatility and then maybe be able to pull that off. Who else?
It gets hard to find deals for the Cavs because it almost has to come from the West or like the way bottom of the East. And Atlanta's a total mess. Orlando's a total mess. Chicago has pieces, but they're all pretty young. Brooklyn has Dinwiddie, which I think actually would make a lot of sense for them. I mean, you look at the rest of the teams. I mean, Sacramento, George Hill, I think would help. Dallas, you mentioned Wes Matthews. I think Wes Matthews and then just having Nerlens Noel as a throw-in and see what the hell happens with Nerlens. As a Rich Paul client, just say, okay, Nerlens, we have brought you to Cleveland. Please do not fuck this up and see what happens. Maybe you get mature Nerlens for 2 months.
Right.
Phoenix doesn't really have anyone I'm interested in terms of older players who can help. Memphis is interesting because I wonder if someone like JaMychal Green could help them. Like, could you do JaMychal Green and Tyreek Evans somehow?
I think so. I definitely think you could probably get that done. I think if you offer, let me put it this way. The last time I have not checked in with Memphis to ask them about Marcus Hall. And I won't until I hear something different. But knowing what their situation is, I'm pretty sure that if you said, we'll give you Tristan Thompson, if you give us Tyreek, JaMychal Green, Wayne Selden, who's actually really good.
Yeah.
And filler. Memphis probably does it because Memphis has to be like, this is not going to work long term. Like, we know where we're going. Maybe not, but I can see that definitely being on the table. Like, just an opportunity to get younger with Tristan is important. So,
by the way, you want to know what the scary thing is about that? You say getting younger. Tristan is 1 year younger than JaMychal Green.
Yeah. I mean, but I guess there's the thing. They need to get younger with their core pieces, and like they did not pay JaMychal Green enough to keep him long term. Like right. they chose to go the discount route, and I think they're gonna suffer for that. Like it was clearly like okay, I'm signing this deal, but the second I'm unrestricted, I'll see you. Like that's.
Well, you know who's another piece that could actually help the Cavs is James Ennis. Like that could actually be useful for them off the bench, I think.
I mean, look, we're at a point where if you are athletic and under the age of 28, you're an upgrade. You're an upgrade for Cleveland. Like this is how crazy it is, and I'm like, have always been a doubter since I liked him as a prospect and then quickly learned how dumb I was. Like, if you ask me, like, would Evan Turner make this team better? I can't tell you no.
Oh, he would. I mean, they can't take on $17.5 million, but he would. Here's the move that I think is interesting too. Could you get Derek Favors and Rodney Hood from Utah?
No, I just think that I think those guys have gotten way too much offers. I mean, think about how much Utah has popped up in talks in the last 2 weeks. That is not Dennis Lindsey out there negotiating through the media. No. They've talked to everybody. Like, they talked to Chicago leaks. They've talked to OKC. OKC's a little bit. OKC, you often hear about guys OKC wants. You never hear about the guys OKC gets. So, like, there's all these things. Now, do I think that there's probably been reporting done, like, inside? Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, like, Tony's all over it. But yeah, I do think that there's I tend to look at Utah as like a middle of the pack in terms of how they use the media and how they do that public stuff. So but even then, like, we just know that there's been enough offers. And again, we get into the problem of Cleveland has to operate under the radar. And this is another problem, I think, with operating with an inexperienced GM and God knows what Dan Gilbert's doing. Is you really need to be able to operate like Sam Presti in the situation where it's like radio silence. Nope, we're just going to stay pat. Nope, we're not doing anything. Oh, we made a huge move. Like, that's where you should have been. But instead, like, everybody, I mean, their leverage is ruined. You know, like, everyone knows they have to do something. Everyone knows. How are you going to get a return? What GM is going to be like, sure, I'll help you. Like, the only team that's in a position to do that is Atlanta. Atlanta is the only team that's in a position to be like, hey, we will give you whoever you want if you give us that Brooklyn pick. We'll take on whatever money you want. We'll take on Tristan. We'll take on JR. We'll take Channing. We'll take Iman. We'll take whoever you want if you give us that Brooklyn pick. But there is nobody on Atlanta. No combination of Pep. Although I would say, like, Delaney and Bazemore and Dedmon would help a lot. Like, those three guys are three that I would randomly say, like, would help. But this is the problem with the Brooklyn pick. Think about what was reported today on the Low Post podcast. The only way that they're trading that pick is if they get Paul George level talent. And that's not the right way to think about this. No. Don't try and turn this. Like, there's not a market for that. There are no stars. 67 players with at least one all-star appearance changed teams in the last calendar year. 67, Sam. So
I can't believe there are 67 players with one all-star appearance.
There's a lot of them. 67 combined all-star appearances.
That makes more sense.
67 combined all-star appearances. All of those guys already changed teams. So, like, you're not getting that return for that pick. The better thing would be to be like, we have one asset. Let's turn this into multiple assets. But again, I ask the question of, like, well, if you're going to do that, don't go out and get role players that you're going to be stuck with once LeBron takes off. Go get yourself, like, just commit yourself to getting all the things that you're going to need after. Because here's what's crazy is if they could talk LeBron into it, they're just like, look, this situation is broken. Okay. We'll buy Wade out. He can join you wherever. Okay. We'll buy Wade out, but you need to tell us where you want to go because we can't fix this. And you're obviously gone. And we need to get started on what the next generation of where we're going to be in 3 years. Like, you left us once and it destroyed us. Please help us so that we don't go back to that place. If you love the city and the franchise, help us get to the next place as opposed to you just going.
See, that's the pitch, I think. You gave a pitch earlier that was like a little bit hostile toward LeBron. I think that's the pitch. And I think he would probably say, maybe. You know, like, I think you'd have to present him with offers. The other problem is, though, that what team is a contender that also has young players that you could move? And there's one team that actually comes to mind. Minnesota is interesting to me. If you're Minnesota, you have Karl Towns, you have Andrew Wiggins, Jimmy Butler. I mean, Jeff Teague is an interesting fit with LeBron James. Are you willing, and this is hilarious, to trade Andrew Wiggins for a year of LeBron?
If you're Minnesota, if you're Cleveland?
If you're Minnesota.
Oh, I 100% jump at that. I do that without even having to think about it. I am screaming, yes, yes, yes. I will call in the league right now. Can we do it now? Let's do it now. Here's the facts. Like, that's how fast I'm doing that if I'm Minnesota.
I agree. with you. I would do it quickly. I would also give up like a couple of first round picks or whatever the hell I need.
Yeah, I would do whatever. I would do whatever they wanted. Anything that's not Butler or Towns. I would do absolutely. Tyus Jones gone.
Who is the better centerpiece than Andrew Wiggins that's out there? Among contending teams, that's the tricky part.
There's not.
Like, yeah, right? I think realistically it has to like
again. I want the
order better.
Like, I want the picks. Like that's what I want. Like I'm more likely to be like to go to Philadelphia and be like, I want everything left in your cachet. I want the rest of it. I want everything left.
You still need some sort of present value, though.
You do. I mean, I guess you do, but I wouldn't. I know that you need it from an optic standpoint, but that would just be like my question would be like if asked if that question came up in the press conference, like why didn't you pursue a current player value? My response would be, what player value is going to even start to compare with LeBron James? Like, how fair is it to put a player as the guy who got traded for LeBron? Is that fair to that guy's career? No. Like, I'm not going to put that on a kid, and there's nobody that can fill that kind of gap.
So like, if you're Philly, it's Markelle Fultz. It's what, there are 2 picks this year that are currently like right around the lottery,
right?
And the Sacramento pick.
Yep.
I don't do that if I'm Philly.
I don't either. Because I don't think LeBron resigns. I don't think LeBron wants to play with a bunch of 20-year-olds.
Right.
So I don't do it if I'm Philly. But I'll tell you this: like if it was the Wolves, I'd be like, I don't want. Under no circumstances do I want Wiggins. Under no circumstances do I want that contract for that player. No, thank you. Pass.
Okay, here's a crazy one. Denver.
This one I've thought a little bit about, and it's hard because I live here and I cover the team, so it becomes this question of like, are you seeing things the way, because this happens with all writers that are close to a team or are on a beat. Like you start to see things a little bit too close to the vest. The problem becomes twofold. Now, okay, I'll say this. Josh Kroenke has done a lot to invest himself with the banana boat gang through the years. There's a relationship there with LeBron. They almost got Wade. As much as everybody says that was a smokescreen, I don't think it was as much of a smokescreen as everybody thinks it was. It might have been one. I don't think it was as much of one. Like these things are gradients. But the problem is, can you risk him leaving for giving up Jamal? You can't give up Jamal and Gary. They got to choose one or the other. Like you just, if I was Denver, if I was Denver, I'd just be like, I can't. I literally would not have enough left. Like I can't give you that because I wouldn't have enough left to try and keep LeBron with. I can't trot out Emmanuel Mudiay and Will Barton alongside LeBron James in the playoff series. I can't do that. So if you give one of those two, their first round pick, another first round pick, unprotected 2 years down the line.
Malik and Wancho probably.
I would go Barton. You give them a value player that's going to be a free agent, so they can either re-sign him or, like, if they re-sign him, they can get him for good value. Barton's not going to take off for like $20 million, right?
Yeah, but does he help? Like, does he help them over the course of the next 3 years get to a playoff run even?
At like $8 million, he helps you. Like he does what he's done in Denver, which is he helps get the young guys. Like Will Barton's emotional energy and unboundless optimism and the way that he cares about basketball is a valuable thing to have in a locker room.
That's true. Fair point.
Especially because you're drafting, like you're going to be drafting whoever's next. And so, Will may take off in free agency just because he wants to, but if he does, you're clearing Isaiah off the books and you're clearing Will off the books. And so all of a sudden you've cleared $24 million off the books. And that's before you trade Kevin Love. So there's all these like substantial other moves that happen. So like, I like the fit for like, if your starting five was Jamal, JR, JR back in Denver is a rough one.
Yeah.
Jamal, JR, LeBron, Millsap, Jokic. That is a tough team. I mean,
okay, you got rid of Harris instead of Jamal. I would probably make it Jamal. Like if I was Cleveland, I would be like, you have to give me Jamal.
Yeah, and see, that's one where I'm crazy because I've been this high on this kid since the Pan Am games. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it because it's LeBron James. It's not a matter of like, oh no, I can't give up Jamal. He's more valuable than LeBron. It's like, I don't know if I can, like, if LeBron leaves and then I lost Jamal for nothing.
Oh no, I totally understand.
Like I'm losing if I'm Tim Connelly, it's like I'm losing my job. You know, like I'm out of work because I don't have Jamal and I don't have LeBron and I lost all these other things. And we don't have 2 picks out of the next 3 years. That's pretty rough.
Yeah, I don't know that you can do it. I mean, like it's hard to find a trade for LeBron that works.
Yeah, it turns out it's hard to get value back for the greatest player in a generation. I'll tell you when I do. I'll tell you when I do like it. I'm never gonna let go of this one. Never gonna let go of it. So DeAndre is at how much? What's his number? Is it 20?
23, 24?
You trade DeAndre
23.
23. You trade DeAndre. And Bradley's expiring contract and Lou Williams' expiring contract. And you trade every other pick for like the next 4 years and give them, if they want Decker, have it. If they want Harrell, whatever else they want on that roster, they can have. But you get LeBron James. And you say, and you're going to have like almost nothing left on this roster. But you make it clear the objective is to get Paul George this summer. You clear all of the money, and you say the objective is to get Paul George next summer.
I don't mind that. I mean, what, you have to clear Danilo too.
and when LeBron, like, because you have to have the conversation that you're not technically allowed to have, right? But the Clippers the Cavs can grant you the chance to talk to him. Jerry West says to him, "How tired are you?" And LeBron says, "I'm pretty tired, man." Okay. You've been playing all of these minutes, all of these games, all of these years. Take 3 months. Take 3 months and just get your mind right. Just rest. Get yourself back to peak form. Help us recruit this summer. Like, we have Los Angeles and we have you. Is it going to be hard for us to find guys that want to play here? His answer will be no. And then you make a run. And you say, like, you get to be in LA. You get to have all the things that you've thought about with LA, and you don't have to deal with any of the Lakers nonsense. You get to have your run of the place, and Steve Ballmer is going to introduce you to every tech mogul that he knows.
I guess my question is, how does this help Cleveland? Because if you're getting all of the future picks,
but he's going to be there. Yeah.
So you're not really getting any value until 4 years down the road?
Maybe like the better move is to negotiate a 3-way deal with DeAndre. Like you find people that want Lou Williams and DeAndre and are willing to get round picks, and they go to Cleveland. And then
that's probably the move.
Yeah. You find multiple partners to pull up. I mean, you have to be a multi-team deal. And again, like this is everyone like listening to this is like, they're not trading LeBron. I get that. It's just like, if you ask me, what does Cleveland do? I don't have an answer for you. Like there is, and I say this as somebody, this is the thing is like, well, you know, they always do this. It's like, look, man, it's not just the numbers. It's not just that they are literally like, they have flirted with being the worst defense in the NBA. It's not just they have a negative point differential, which is unheard of for a team that's supposed to contend for a title. It's that I've sat there and I've watched this team. I've broken it down. I've been like, well, okay, let's throw out the bad ones and look at some. Even when they play well, in terms of a win, they're still god awful. To me, there are two choices. You trade LeBron, or you just say, whatever will be, will be. And you just hope that this thing turns around. And that's probably the safest option of all of them, right? Is that instead of messing with a LeBron trade, which is just bad juju, you just be like, whatever will be, will be. And you deal with the consequences. My only thing is that like he's going to leave, and then you're going to be in a hard place where you're going to lose him, and you're going to lose Isaiah, and then you're going to have to trade Love, and your market's going to be compromised. Like there's a path here where they are back to being peak bad Cavs. And being bad in that market is real tough to get out of.
I think I agree with. I mean, like, look, I'm on the same page as you here. I just can't see Dan Gilbert doing it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it comes down to. Like,
yeah, I mean, this is all part of it. Is like there's legitimately a problem with the fact that like their lack of a strong front office leader is just devastating. I mean, it's,
right. I agree.
There's no one to sell the vision to Gilbert. There's no one to be like, Dan, I know how you feel, but listen, like in 3 years, we could have like LeBron will be in the West. We could be back up there. Like all of these things.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm on the same page as you here, but this is a really tricky spot for Cleveland. They can't give up too much future value, but they also like need to tangibly do something that can increase their chances. I do not envy Kobe Altman right now, who I have yet to really see a lot of impressive things from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about him to know. I will say
I've heard really good things about him. I've heard he's really smart.
I'll say it's like Zach Lowe was talking today on the Low Post. He was like, I don't want all this revisionist history about how the Cavs were so dumb for that trade. Like, he did the best he could in the Kyrie Irving trade.
Yeah, he did.
I went back and read what I wrote, and I was like, he made the best out of a bad situation, and that's really hard to do in the NBA. But it just turns out that Danny Ainge bought Lowe on basically like a fine piece of automotive machinery that had like several severe Carfax warnings on it.
Yes.
Only he bought it and then he got it and his mechanic fixed everything. It turned out like 2 pieces of things need to be changed. Only like, again, it's the same car. Like it's just the same car you bought. It's just not broken. And then meanwhile, in return, like Kobe Altman bought like a really looking great piece of like a car that comes with stellar reviews, but it did have an accident. It did have that accident. So like the fender, yeah, it's busted, but I'm sure it's nothing that like some simple body work won't fix. And then it turns out like, no, it needs a whole new axles, like the entire rear suspension is jacked. And the other like side piece that you bought, the gift card that you bought, yeah, that store is all of a sudden like the inflation has hit it in some other country, and now it's not nearly worth as much. I'm reaching for my analogy here, but the point stands. Like Altman got good assets return on Kyrie Irving, and they went bad, and Danny Ainge paid full price for Kyrie Irving, and it's turned out well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. I think that, I lauded that trade at the time. I thought it was a really good trade. It hasn't worked out. Kobe Altman did the best he could. It's just that you hear things like, for instance, what Ken Berger reported in that Cavs front office, where Kobe is kind of a figurehead for Dan Gilbert's involvement. That's a little bit scary. That's a little bit scary if you're Cleveland. Yep. Let's talk real quick about 3 things that do not really matter in the grand scheme of the NBA, but I find them interesting. The Blazers are trying to get out of the luxury tax. They might be looking to trade Maurice Harkless. He's a guy that strikes me as someone that it's worth taking a flyer on. What do you think of Maurice Harkless?
I like him a lot. I like all these Blazers guys right now. If they're selling, I would want to get in on that. If they're trying to figure out a DeAndre deal, I would be trying to work my way in. Like I like all these guys. I think Harkless is a guy that he's managed to improve every year. He's turning into like his role is very
except
defined.
This year.
Right. His role is very defined to me though.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's a wing guy that has some switchability. Like I think in the right system he can be really good. I think that I would want to buy low on Mo Harkless. I like all of their dudes though. Like I would be desperately trying to get Ed Davis and Al-Farouq Aminu. If they're serious about this DeAndre thing and they're having trouble making the money work, I would be throwing everything. Like I would be trying. There are so many teams that I look at and go like, I would want to get in on that. Like that's a great actually that's a great opportunity for Cleveland. Is Cleveland should get into the 3-way talks for DeAndre with the Blazers and be like, hey, we'll help make the money work if we can get the Blazers glue guys. Like we want Ed Davis, Harkless, at all. Like that's or Aminu. Like I would want those guys. Those are the guys that I want because that defense is legit this year and it's entirely driven by all those glue guys.
So what? I guess you'd have to go Yusuf Nurkic to Clippers, DeAndre to Blazers, and then
the Cavs fill in cap filler for DeAndre on top of the Nurkic deal, right?
Yeah,
right.
And then they get Harkless.
And then they deal their own pick. They deal their own pick to the Clippers.
Yeah.
Right. And that would actually be ideal, right? It's like, because then either Portland sends their first, and that's probably the deal, is like the Cavs send their first to the Clippers and Portland sends their first to the Cavs.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. I might need you to take back Evan Turner in that scenario if I am sending a first rounder.
I think you do it. Like,
that doesn't hurt the Cavs this year.
Like, I think if you can figure out how to make the money work, I think you do it.
That's not a terrible idea. Number 2 here, Willie Hernan-Gomez wants a trade from the New York Knicks. This is something that in the Athletic season preview that Eric Koreen puts together every year, he asked, what stupid thing will the Knicks do this year? I said they would piss off Willie Hernan-Gomez by playing Enes Kanter and someone else at center, like Kyle O'Quinn, and they would end up trading him in the midseason. Well, it looks like that's going to be right. Do you like Willie Hernan-Gomez?
He's the worst.
Not a fan?
He's so bad. I always refer to whenever the Knicks and the Nuggets play, they always meet, and I'm always like, oh, look, there's a good Hernan-Gomez greeting his brother, Willie.
Yeah. No, I mean, Juancho is better than Willie, for sure.
Like, so much better. And just like everything Willie does just grinds on me. Like, the mistakes that he makes, even for a young guy, crush me. I don't like the way that his body moves. Like, I want no part of it. Like, I would cut him and let him go back to Spain. Like, yeah.
I would give up a second round pick for Willie Hernan-Gomez. No issues. If I was,
I mean, it's worth a fly. Like, I mean, if you're, I'm trying to think like Dallas, if they move Nerlens, that's a second round pick. Like if you're the Sixers, why not? You always need extra bodies for when Embiid goes down. Like
if I was Milwaukee, I would have rather traded a second round pick for Willie Hernan-Gomez than for Tyler Zeller.
I disagree. I would rather have Zeller.
Well, it's good that you disagree there because my third thing here is Tyler Zeller for a second round pick and Rashad Vaughn. What did you think of this deal?
So Zeller is a guy that it's really weird. The metrics look really good on him over like his career arc. And there's like his skill set makes a lot of sense to me. My concern is like the Celtics literally were like, nope, don't care. Anytime Brad Stevens is like, nope, don't care. I'm like, that's not good. I mean, I like Vaughn too, though. I thought this was like a nice buy low for both sides. I don't really care about the second rounder. It's weird.
Second rounder is interesting because it is 31-48 protected this year. No, 31-47 protected this year. Milwaukee is currently sitting at 52 in the second round. Okay, that might actually not transfer then, or it actually might transfer. I'm sorry. If Milwaukee takes a step back, and it really wouldn't take much of a step back for them to get to where they would be handing over that pick, as in it would be like a game and a half, I would not want to send the unprotected 2020 second round pick for Tyler Zeller.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not. And the only reason is because like then they pick somebody and he happens to be good. And then it's all like, they traded the second round pick. Look how dumb they are. And like no one remembers the hundreds of second round picks that are dealt that turn into nothing. Like nobody mentions things. It's only the mistakes that get augmented. And so from a PR standpoint, I'd be hesitant to do it. But
15 second round picks this year have already been traded.
But I think at the same time, like I think it's probably time to like, I don't know. If you think that there's value there, I think mostly they're just trying to get off of Vaughn. You know, like they're trying to get off of Vaughn. It gets you a veteran guy to go at the end of the rotation and a break glass if necessary. I don't mind it. I just don't mind it.
Yeah, that's fine. Speaking of which, let's end on the massive LeBron conversation that we had. Milwaukee for LeBron is very interesting. I mean, I can't ever really see Milwaukee trading Chris Middleton because they love Chris Middleton. But Chris Middleton, Malcolm Brogdon is kind of an interesting package.
I would love it. I think, I would go for it. Like that one, that's a really great combination is Brogdon and Middleton.
Or maybe you go Brogdon and Jabari.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd probably ask for all three. Like I would be,
if you're Milwaukee though, and you have no chance of signing LeBron long-term, you probably can't do that. Right.
I mean, I think that's a part of the thing is like, you got to have that conversation. And if he's just like, nope, then I don't think you can do the deal to begin with. Right. So like the only teams that can do it are teams that he's like, we'll see. Like if the Clippers did it and he was like, okay, I'm interested. We'll see. I'm not going to say yes, but we'll see. But at Milwaukee, he was like, I am not playing in Milwaukee for the rest of my career. This is not happening.
If you're Milwaukee, you have Giannis, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe, LeBron, and Tony Snell.
Yep.
If he really cares about winning, can he do better than that?
Yes.
Probably in the free agency market.
Well, like Houston and San Antonio are the two to me.
Yeah.
It's like if he wants to win, he can go play on the second best team in the West, or he can go play for the best coach in the West. And those are like the two choices. Is like if he's serious about winning. This is what we're gonna learn a lot about LeBron this summer. Like this summer is going to teach us a lot about where LeBron is at this point in his life. Because in 2010, he was about maximizing his brand and winning championships. And he did that. In 2014, it was about establishing his legacy. And that's why he went back to Cleveland. Now, it's fascinating, right? It's about like, do you want to enjoy life? Do you want to shore up your legacy? Do you want to have fun? Like there's all these fascinating questions. But if it's like,
do you need to increase your legacy to potentially become the best player ever?
If he is the player that he says he is, and he's just like, no, I'm not going out like this. I don't care. Fuck the Warriors. No, I'm not going out like this. Then he's got to go to Houston, or he's got to go to San Antonio. Those are his only two choices to me. There is no alternative that gets him close enough. There is no. I mean, look, the Bucks are great. They've got all this young talent. I like them a lot. I love Giannis. It's great. It's awesome. But they don't have the experience, gravitas, and they're not at that level as an organization. Like the players aren't there, nobody's there. But if he goes to San Antonio, and he goes and he's just like, we battled, I won one, you won one. I need help. Please help me. And you've got, and they'll do whatever's necessary to build what they need around him.
Yeah.
And he's able to say like, I can't guard the top player every single night.
Well, Kawhi can do that. But that's what's interesting to me about Milwaukee, though, and you can also add this. So you have Giannis, you have Chris Middleton. They can both take the toughest defensive assignment away from him. LeBron isn't going to have to do shit defensively.
Right.
Eric Bledsoe, Rich Paul client, there's a connection there. You can go out and hire David Fizdale and just say, hey, Dave, LeBron's coming. He's staying for a year at least. Let's try and make this work. That actually seems like there's a decent confluence of things that could actually make sense there.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's a path to where you can see that happening.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen. Matt, tell the people where they can find your work.
You can catch me on Twitter at HP Basketball. You can find my podcast, Spread the Floor, on iTunes or wherever fine podcasts are sold. You can check out all my work at actionnetwork.com. Great stuff every single day. We got a betting guide going up tomorrow that covers absolutely every game in the NBA. Fascinating stuff, as well as my trade deadline piece. Please check it out. You can catch me at HP Basketball or at Matt Moore, TAN.
Matt, I'm excited for you to come out to LA in about a week and a half. So that is going to be great. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. We're up on Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, whatever you're looking for. Pocket Casts even. That's a new one that I got today. We're up there. I made sure and checked that. We'll be back later this week, probably after the trade deadline, maybe right before the trade deadline if something crazy happens. But until that next time, we will talk soon. Bye.